Right now I am walking a quiet trail through the woods west of Minneapolis, in the country around Lake Minnetonka. In a single afternoon here you can cross two very different worlds. One is a wild nature preserve, a rescued scrap of the ancient forest that once covered all of this land. The other is a working farm, where animals graze and food is still grown by hand. They sit only a few miles apart, on the same big water shore, and together they tell the whole story of this place. Come walk both of them with me. This is the Lake Minnetonka country, a maze of bays and wooded islands just west of the twin cities of Minnesota. The name itself comes from the Dakota language, from the words Minnetonka, meaning big water. Territorial officials borrowed that name for the lake in the 1850s, but the water was known and traveled long before any of them arrived. To understand these two parks, you have to start with the people who knew this shore first, and with the great forest that once stood here. This is the homeland of the Dakota people, and of the Bdewakantunwan, the Mdewakanton, one of the eastern Dakota bands. Their main villages lay along the Minnesota River Valley to the south, but this lake country was part of their world, a place to hunt, to fish, and to gather sap and make maple sugar in the spring. Points along the shore carried spiritual meaning. For generations, this was not wilderness to them at all, but a known and living landscape, tended and traveled with the turning of the seasons. The forest closing in around this trail is a survivor. Early settlers called this country the Big Woods, a translation of the French name Grand Bois. It was a dense hardwood forest of sugar maple, basswood, elm, and oak that once covered thousands of square miles of south-central Minnesota. It was shadowy, tangled, and hard to clear, and to the newcomers it seemed to go on forever. Today, barely 1% of that great forest is left standing, in scattered parks and preserves, and this is one of them. This first world is Carver Park Reserve, more than 3,700 acres of woods, lakes, prairie, and marsh, held by the Three Rivers Park District. What makes it remarkable is that most of what you see is not untouched. Much of this land had been cleared and farmed, and beginning in the 1960s, it was deliberately allowed to grow wild again, restored back toward prairie, wetland, and woodland. It is a picture of a landscape being healed, patiently, over the span of a human lifetime. The trail leads out toward open water and the edge of a marsh, where cattails and reeds stand thick in the shallows. Wetlands like this one are the quiet engines of this whole country. They filter the water, they soak up floods, and they shelter an astonishing amount of life, from herons and turtles to frogs and dragonflies and countless nesting birds. For a long time, marshes were seen as wasteland to be drained. Here they are treasured instead, protected on purpose, left wet and wild and full of sound. Where the trees open up, the grasses take over, tall and gold and swaying in the wind. This is restored prairie, replanted where crop fields once stood. Real prairie is far more than a lawn gone long. It is a deep community of native grasses and flowers with roots that reach many feet down into the soil, storing carbon, feeding pollinators, and holding the earth together. Bringing it back is slow, careful work, a matter of seed and fire and years of patience, and standing in it you can feel that effort paying off. At the heart of Carver Park sits a low building among the oaks that helped start a movement. The Lowry Nature Center opened in 1969, the first public nature center in the Twin Cities metro area. It was championed by Goodrich and Louisa Lowry, who believed people, and especially children, needed a place to meet the natural world directly. Ever since, school buses have rolled up to its doors, and generations of kids have walked its wetland boardwalk and met their first frog, turtle, and towering oak here. The transformation of this land into farms and parks began with the stroke of a pen. In 1851, in two treaties signed at Traverse des Sioux and at Mendota, the Dakota bands were pressured into ceding vast portions of their homeland, tens of millions of acres, including this lake country. The land tied to the people here passed through the Treaty of Mendota. The promised payments were late, reduced, and eaten up by traders and their claims. In a few years, a homeland of centuries was opened to settlement and sale. Settlers came quickly after that. New England and New York families founded a village on the lake and named it Excelsior, a Latin word meaning ever upward. Nearby, a township took the name Minnetrista, said to blend the Dakota word for water with a word for crooked, for the winding shape of the shore. The newcomers set to work with axes and oxen, clearing the big woods 1 acre at a time, pulling stumps, and turning the shadowed forest floor into open, sunlit fields of crops. By the 1880s, Lake Minnetonka had become something else entirely, one of the most fashionable resorts in the American Midwest. Grand hotels with long verandas rose along the bays, and enormous excursion steamboats carried holiday crowds across the water. The largest of them, the Belle of Minnetonka, could reportedly carry as many as 2,500 passengers at once. For a few glittering decades, this quiet lake country echoed with brass bands and paddle wheels, a summer playground for a young and booming region. But the deepest mark this land left on the world came not from a hotel, but from a farmer and a small bag of seed. In 1857, a German immigrant named Wendelin Grimm arrived from the Duchy of Baden and settled just here, in Carver County near the village of Victoria. In his baggage, he carried a handful of seed for a forage crop he called Uiger Klee, everlasting clover. It was a kind of alfalfa, and in the brutal Minnesota winters it kept freezing and dying in his fields. So Grimm did something patient and quietly brilliant. Each year he saved seed from the few plants that survived the winter and sowed it again. Season after season, the survivors passed on their hardiness, until after many years he had something entirely new, the first winter hardy alfalfa in North America. Grimm alfalfa spread from this one farm across the whole continent and helped feed American agriculture for generations. His farmhouse still stands, preserved inside Carver Park Reserve and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. That story is the perfect bridge between our two worlds, because a few miles from this wild preserve, the other face of this land is still very much alive and at work. If Carver Park shows us the wild forest returning, our second stop shows us the farm, not as a thing of the past, but as a living, breathing place where people still raise animals and grow food, and where children come to learn exactly where a meal begins. This is Gale Woods Farm, a working farm of about 410 acres wrapped around the shore of Whaletail Lake in Minnetrista. Like Carver Park, it belongs to the Three Rivers Park District, but it is run as something rare, a real farm that is also a public classroom. Along these fences you will find sheep and cattle grazing, poultry, big vegetable gardens and hayfields. It is quiet, ordered, and alive with the plain daily rhythm of a place where food is genuinely produced. The farm carries a family name and a family story. Richard and Isabel Gale established a farm on this ground back in 1923, working these fields through the whole sweep of the 20th century. Near the end of it, the Gale family chose to give the land away with a single wish: that it stay undeveloped, that it keep farming, and that it be used to teach. The Park District honored that wish, and around 2 decades ago Gale Woods opened its gates to the public as a teaching farm. The whole farm bends around this water, Whaletail Lake, and in late summer its surface is a broad green quilt of lily pads and lotus stretching almost to the far tree line. It is a shallow, two-lobed lake, and folks will tell you the name comes from a shape that, seen from above, suggests the flukes of a whale's tail. Herons stalk the shallows, turtles bask on the logs, and red-winged blackbirds ring in the reeds. The wild and the working farm meet right here at the water's edge. Everything at Gale Woods is meant to be understood, not just seen. The sheep and cattle are raised on grass and moved from pasture to pasture. The gardens grow the vegetables, and the whole harvest, the meat, the eggs, the produce, feeds directly into farm-to-table classes, camps, and school visits. Children come here and discover, often for the first time, that wool grows on a living animal and that dinner starts in the soil. It is agriculture taught the honest way, with your hands and your boots. And that is the quiet lesson of this one day in these two parks. Carver Park Reserve and Gale Woods Farm sit only a short drive apart, on the same Lake Minnetonka shore, cared for by the same park district. One works to let the land go wild again, rebuilding the forest, the prairie, and the marsh. The other works to farm the land well, and to teach that skill to the next generation. They are two answers to the same question: how do we live rightly with a piece of ground? A rescued forest and a living farm, a Dakota homeland, a bag of everlasting clover that changed a continent, all folded into a few miles of the Lake Minnetonka country. This is why I keep walking these trails, to find the whole world hiding in a single afternoon close to home. If this walk stayed with you the way it stayed with me, follow along, and let us keep exploring these places together, one trail at a time.